So you've just built an iSpindel, or maybe you purchased a pre-assembled unit, but there's a few things that you need to do before you can use it in a fermentation, and the first of those is to calibrate the unit. So today I'm going to show you how to connect to and calibrate the iSpindel using the easy method, and in future videos I'm also going to show you the fast ferment method as well. The iSpindel results are only going to be as good as your calibration, so this is a really important step to get right. And the first thing to do is to make sure that we've got the iSpindel fully charged. To charge the iSpindel, we're just going to take off the lid and connect a micro USB cable into the top USB port of the iSpindel. The light will be solid red on the iSpindel while it's charging, and it will change to solid blue as soon as it's finished charging, which might take a few hours. Just a reminder, when there's a battery installed in the iSpindel, we only want to use the top USB port for charging. If you're plugging into the Wemos board, make sure that you remove the battery from the iSpindel. So while the iSpindel is charging, let's get a few things ready for our calibration. To calibrate the iSpindel, we're going to give it some pre-known gravity solutions and record the tilt value of the iSpindel in those different solutions. We're then going to plot it onto a graph, which is going to spit out a formula that converts those different tilt values into our specific gravity. Now, all of that sounds pretty complex, but all that we basically need to do is mix up some sugar water, take a few readings, write it in the program, and the software is going to do all the hard work for us. We're going to start the calibration in pure water and then mix up a solution which is the highest gravity that we typically see in our home brews. Now, this is probably going to change from person to person depending on what styles you usually brew. To do the calibration, you don't really need too much, and if you've been home brewing a while, you've already got these anyway. This is what we're going to use. To start things off, we need a pot or a measuring jug. Now, either will work. Just keep in mind that we will be diluting along the way, so the volume is going to have to rise, or you can do it in a smaller vessel, tipping out and topping up as you go. Next thing we need is something to give us our gravity, and we're just going to use regular sugar for that. Now, we're going to use well under 1 kilo today, so it should only be a couple of dollars. Next up, we need something to reference the gravity with, so either a hydrometer or a refractometer. Either one will work in this situation, so use whatever you've already got. Temperature can play a really big role in how the gravity reads, so we're going to make sure that we keep a consistent temperature throughout the whole calibration process. We're going to use a thermometer to make sure we keep 20 degrees Celsius at every single reading. For adding in our sugar and our water for the dilution, a set of scales and a measuring jug. Lastly, we're going to need a laptop or a phone so that we can connect to the iSpindel and read the values, and also use a few online tools along the way. So that's everything we're going to use for the calibration. First things first, we're going to make sure the iSpindel's in there nice and snug and set our ideal float angle. The iSpindel uses many different parts from different manufacturers, and therefore there can be imperfections in the way that the iSpindel fits inside the bottle. So what we want to do is make sure it has a really nice tight fit inside the bottle, but it can still be removed if it has to be. The gyroscope of the iSpindel is extremely sensitive, and we don't want the position of the iSpindel changing in the tube after we've set our float angle, as it may throw out our calibration. Keep in mind, we will also be using the top USB port for charging the iSpindel, so we don't want that moving the iSpindel within the tube either. Have a play with your iSpindel and see how it's sitting inside the tube. If you can't even fit it inside the tube, you may have to very lightly sand down the edges of the PCB until it has a nice firm fit. If it's easily moved or rattling around, the best thing to do is to add some sticky tape to the sides of the PCB. You can add a couple of layers if you need to get the perfect fit, but this will make sure that the iSpindel keeps its calibration for many brews to come. Once you're happy with the nice tight fit inside the tube, it's a good idea to keep the ears of the PCB just above the rim of that tube. That way, when we're calibrating our float angle, we can just push down ever so slightly if we need to adjust that float angle. Once you're happy with the fit of the iSpindel inside the tube, it's time to move on to our first calibration, which is our offset calibration. And to do this, we're going to need a laptop or a phone, and we're going to connect via Wi-Fi straight to the iSpindel. Switch on the iSpindel by flicking the switch underneath the lid, and you should see a blue blinking light on the main board as well as a red light on the gyro. And now we're going to look for the iSpindel in our Wi-Fi networks. If you've configured the iSpindel already to connect to your home Wi-Fi or to a service, you may have to put it in configuration mode in order to connect to it. So to do that, I'm just going to jump the reset pins, just using the back of a spoon here. And after we do that 4 times, you should see a blue blinking light once every second, and now you should be able to connect to it. Once it shows up in your Wi-Fi, click connect on it, and if it shows up that there's no internet connection with it, just click connect anyway. Once you're connected, we need to go to the iSpindel homepage, which is 192.168.4.1. Once that page is up, you can click on iSpindel info and you can see the changes in the tilt value as you move the iSpindel around, and you should get a temperature reading as well. What we need to do now is our offset calibration, and we need a perfect level surface, and a kitchen bench is often good, but double check before you do this. Place the iSpindel battery side down on this surface and let it rock back and forth while it finds its natural resting position. Once it stops moving, have a look at how the gyro is sitting and make sure it looks level. Sometimes slight marks on the bench or in the bottle can make it sit in a false position, so make sure that gyro is looking level. Once it's sitting there nice and level, we're going to go into maintenance, and now we'll click calibrate. The light will be solid blue on the iSpindel as it's calibrating and go back to blinking once it's done. The tilt value should now show 89.9, and if it doesn't, you can just calibrate one more time. Once that's done, we can put the lid back on the iSpindel and just snug these up. There's no need to go over tight with these. And now we're ready to go on. So the iSpindel's sitting in there nice and snug. We've done our offset calibration, and the first thing to do is our float test. Now, this is a jug of 20 degrees Celsius water, and in that the iSpindel has to float at 25 degrees plus or minus 5 degrees. Now, the closer you can get to 25, the better, but as long as you're in that range, we're going to calibrate anyway, so we're all good to go. First thing to do is to add the iSpindel to the water and let it settle out a little bit. It's going to be moving around for a moment, so we're just going to give it a minute until we take a reading. Okay, we've given the iSpindel a minute there just to stop moving around, and we're getting pretty consistent results now. Now these results are a little bit high, so what I'm going to do is pull the iSpindel out, take the cap off, and just move the board down a little bit. If the angle of the iSpindel in this water is too high, we just need to move it down a little bit in the tube, and if it's too low, vice versa, we need to raise it up a little, and that's why we want it really nice and snug inside this tube so we can make those minor little adjustments. So I've just moved that down, I'm going to add it back to the water, give it a moment to settle out, and then we'll take another reading. Okay, we've made those adjustments, and now our iSpindel is sitting at about 24.8 degrees, which is really good for our calibration, and that's why we want it really snug inside that tube so that we can make those minor adjustments and it's going to stay in place, which will give us really good, accurate results. All right, that's it for the float test done. Next up, we're going to decide what we're going to calibrate to, and to do that, we're going to have to figure out what the highest specific gravity is in our regular brews. Have a look at a bunch of recipes that you've done recently, whether it's in your brewing apps or written down somewhere, and check out the gravities that they usually start at. What you want to do is calibrate from the highest gravity of the regular beers that you do and work the way down from there. If you're only doing mid-strength to regular ales, there's no point calibrating up to a super duper high gravity quadruple milk stout thing anyway, so you may as well figure out what the highest gravity you usually start with is, and we'll calibrate down from that. For me, I like to brew the occasional double IPA, which can get up to 1.075 to 1.080. Much more than that, my brewery system here can't really handle it. So what I'm gonna do is calibrate from 1.080 all the way down. Next up, you need to decide on how many points of calibration you want to do, and the more the better here, but there's not too much of a point of doing more than one every 10 points or so. So today we're going to do one every 10 points, which will give us 9 total points of calibration. But if you wanted to do less, you could do one every 15 points or so, but like I said, the more the better. All right, we're all prepped and ready. Let's get a couple of tools up on the laptop and get calibrating. The first tool that we're going to use is a sugar wash calculator. The link is on the screen now, as well as in the description below. The next thing we need is a dilution calculator, so we're going to use the one on the Brewer's Friend website. There's a link on screen or in the description. Lastly, we need the official iSpindel online gravity calibration tool, which can be found on the website. I've linked it below in the description as well. All right, I've just switched the iSpindel back on and connected it to my phone. I'm going to use my phone separately to the laptop for the readings. You can use the same device if you want to, but I find it a little bit easier just to use a separate device for the readings. First thing to do is we'll put the iSpindel back in that water, we'll give it a minute to settle down, and then we'll take our first reading. What we're gonna do is go into the iSpindel calibration tool. Up the top in gravity unit, you can change this to Plato if you're measuring in Plato, but I'm doing specific gravity today, so that's what I'm gonna choose. In the measurement section, you can choose hydrometer or refractometer. Now I'm going to use a refractometer today, but if you choose refractometer in that, you can only upload the results in Plato, and my refractometer is in specific gravity. So I'm just going to say that it's a hydrometer and record in that. We're going to have a look in our app now and see exactly what the iSpindel is doing. So it's sitting at 24.71, 24.70, 24.72, 24.68, 24.72, so I'm going to call that 24.70 here. As this calibration's in pure water, I'm going to update the reading to 1.000. I'm going to put the tilt at 24.70, just going to click add data there, and that's done. That's added our first point of calibration to the graph there. Now the next thing that we're going to do is calibrate the highest point of what we decided our highest starting gravity is going to be, and to do that we're just going to calculate with the sugar wash calculator how much sugar we need to add. Now I know that I've got 3 litres of water in the jug here. I'm going to transfer it over to the pot. We are going to be diluting, so I don't want to start with the full volume of the pot. And the iSpindel at a high gravity is actually going to sit quite flat. So what we're going to do is figure out how much sugar we need to add for 3 litres to get to that 1.080. So what I'm going to do is keep playing around with just over 3 litres here until the total water needed gets to exactly 3 litres. And after a bit of playing around, we've just found it there at 3.582. So what the calculator is saying here is we need 3 litres of water with 720 grams of sugar, and that'll get us to our 1.080. So first up, we're going to weigh out some sugar. All right, there we go, 720 grams on the dot. All right, I'm gonna add that straight to the pot there. Gonna add in my 3 litres of water. Now it is 20 degrees Celsius water, so it will take a little bit of motivation to get dissolved, but a few minutes of stirring, it'll all be good to go. All right, so the sugar's all mixed in. First thing to do is to take a reading of it just so that we can see exactly where we're sitting. All right, and it looks like we did overshoot the gravity just a tiny little bit. We're sitting at 1.082 now. Don't worry if it's a point or two below or above, that's fine. We're going to enter the exact value anyway into the graph, so that's what it's going to calibrate to. As long as you're doing roughly every 10 points, everything's all good. So next thing to do, we're gonna add 1.082 there. We're gonna record the tilt value with the iSpindel in there, and then we'll move on. When you're taking your readings, just make sure the iSpindel's not touching the bottom of the vessels or the sides. It may just end up in a false reading. All right, so the iSpindel's sitting in there, and just looking at it, you can see there's a massive difference in the way that it's sitting, and it gives you a bit of an insight into how the device actually works. Now, my tilt's reporting here just above 70, so I've got 70.8, 70.04, 70.11, 70.03, so what I'm going to call it is about 70.07, something in the middle there. So what I'm going to do is go over to my tilt value, change that to 70.07. I'm just going to click add data there, and as you can see, it's given us another point in the table, and it's also given us a graph on the right there, and every point that we add is going to plot another position on that graph for us. So the next thing to do is to get our next point. We're going to 1.070, and we're going to use the dilution calculator to figure out how much water we need to add to get to that point. The first thing to do, we're going to go back to that sugar wash calculator and find the desired total volume. That's going to tell us how much solution there actually is with all the sugar dissolved. We're going to copy that over, and that's going to become our wort volume. The current gravity, as we found in the iSpindel calibration, was 1.082, so I'm going to update that to 1.082. Our desired gravity is going to be 1.070. I'm just going to click update, and you can see the new total volume is 4.2 litres, and the difference is 0.62 of a litre. So I'm going to measure out 620 millilitres, making sure that it's 20 degrees so that we keep that consistent temperature throughout. I'm going to take the iSpindel out, mix it all up, and we're going to take a new reading. Now, if you want it to be really accurate, you could weigh out your water, but I'm just eyeballing it with a Pyrex. So I'm just going to add that 620 mils straight to the water there. Give it a good stir around. I'm just going to take another temperature reading just to make sure that we're sitting right in good temp there. Next thing to do, going to take another refractometer reading just to see how we're sitting. Now in between, just make sure you're rinsing this off. Just wipe it down with some paper towel so there's no solution from last time. Also, I'm just rinsing out the pipette a couple of times just to make sure there's nothing left in that old solution so we're not getting a false reading. Awesome, we're sitting at exactly 1.070, which is exactly where we wanted to be. So next thing, we're going to add the iSpindel to the solution there. And while that's settling down, we're just going to add 1.070 to the reading in the iSpindel calibration tool. I'm going to load up the readings onto the phone. Once it's settled down, we'll take the average of those readings, record it in there, and we'll be ready to move on to our next point. Okay, so the iSpindel's pretty still there now. Just looking at the readings, I'm in the mid 65s, so 65.44, 65.45, 65.43, 65.44, so I'm safely going to say that's 65.44 for me. So what I'm going to do is go over to the tilt, change that to 65.44, and as you can see, it's given us another plot point on that graph there, and that's exactly what's going to happen as we go down in the gravities. So next up, 1.060, we're going to go back to that calculator to figure out how much to dilute to, and then we'll move on. Back in the dilution calculator now, we're going to update the wort volume to the new volume below, and we're going to change the current gravity to the 1.070 that we just saw there. Our desired gravity next is going to be 1.060. I'm going to click update, and as you can see, we've got a new volume of 4.9 litres with a difference of 0.7 litres. Now, same process as before, I'm going to fill up with 20 degrees Celsius water to 700 ml, add it to the pot there, stir it all together. We're going to take our different readings with temperature and gravity, we're going to record the tilt, and then we'll add another point of calibration. All right, I've got my 700 ml of water. iSpindel's coming out so we can mix it up nice and well. Just going to add that straight in there. Give it a good mix. Just going to take another temperature reading there, and we're sitting bang on 20 degrees Celsius. Add a few drops to the refractometer, which we've rinsed off and paper towel dry, and we'll take our reading. All right, we're sitting a tiny little bit under, which is totally fine. We're at 1.059, so I'm going to add the iSpindel straight back in there. And while that's settling out a little bit, I'm just going to go back into our calibration tab, change the reading to 1.059. We'll let it settle down before we get the tilt, and we'll add that value to the table. Okay, so everything's settled out there now. I'm getting readings in the 60.6s, so 60.61, 60.70, 60.62, 60.66, 60.66, so 60.65. So I'm going to call that 60.65. I'm going to add that into our tilt value. Okay, we're going to click add data there, and as you can see, another point on the graph. Now we're going to follow the same process for 1.050. Going to update the wort volume to 4.9. Our current gravity was 1.059. We want our desired gravity to be 1.050. We're going to click update. We've got a new volume of 5.78 litres and a difference of 0.88. Same as before, this time 880 mils of water going in. Give it a good stir. We'll take our readings and add that point. We're aiming here for 1.050. Let's have a little look here. And we're at 1.051, which is great. We're going to add the iSpindel back in, take our readings, and then we'll go from there. With everything averaged out, this one's about 54.7, so I'm going to add that to the graph, and then we'll move on to 1.040. Back to the dilution calculator, our wort volume is now going to be 5.78 litres and the current gravity of 1.051. We're going to update the desired gravity to 1.040. Click update and get our results. .59 litres of water going into the pot now. Stirring it up, and we'll get our next point. And we're right there at 1.040, perfect. I'm gonna add in the iSpindel one more time. I'm gonna update the iSpindel calibration reading to 1.040 because we were right on there. Looking at the readings now, looks like we're sitting at 47.16. I'm just gonna add that in right here, 47.16. We'll click add data. And there's our next point added. Now, the next thing we need to do, I'm going to run out of room in the pot here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually take 4 litres out to keep aside, pour the rest out, and we're going to start from that volume to dilute from next. And once that's added, I'm going to go back over to our dilution calculator. I'm going to update that wort volume now to 4 litres. And change the current gravity to 1.040, that's where we left it off. And our next point, we're going to aim for 1.030. I'm going to update that And the difference is 1.33 litres, so I'm going to add that at 20 degrees straight to the pot there, take the next reading. Okay, 1.33 litres going in. Should get us our next reading of 1.030. I'm going to mix that up, get the temperature, take a refrac reading, and then we'll be on. Okay, we're sitting very close. We're at 1.031. I'm going to update that in the calculator again, add the iSpindel back in, and we'll see how we go. So looking at the results now, it's sitting around 40.15. We're bouncing between 40.12 and 40.17. So we're going to call that 40.15, updated in our chart. It's going to add the data there. We can do our next dilution, and then we're almost there. All right, I've just clicked update there, and our new full volume will be 8.26 litres, which is pretty close to the top of this, which is fine. I'm going to do the next calibration like this, and then like before, I'm going to take off a few litres, and then we're going to dilute to the next solution. All right, the 2.93 litres is going to go in now. All right, 2.93 litres has been added there. Just going to check the temp one more time. And we're sitting at 20.4, which is great. Just going to take one more refractometer reading, again washing out the pipette. We've washed and dried this, and we're sitting right on 1.020. Perfect. All right, iSpindel's going back in. We'll update the chart, wait for it to settle down, and we'll take the reading. Just looking at the readings now, we're sitting in the high 33.9s to 34 flat, so this is going to be 33.98. I'm just going to update that here in the tilt value, 33.98. Hit add data, and we're ready to do our last calibration point. Now, like I said, as before, I'm going to take 4 litres out, pour the rest out, go back to the calculator, and it's going to tell us how much we need to add. Four litres of our solution back in. I'm going to go back to the dilution calculator now and update this to 4 litres of our wort volume. And just checking our gravity, we were sitting at 1.020 flat, so we're going to go 1.020. Our desired gravity is going to be 1.010. I'm going to update that. And the new volume is going to be 8 litres, which is a difference of 4 litres. So I'm going to add 4 litres to the pot, and we're going to add our last calibration point. Looks like we're sitting at 1.011 for our last point, which is really, really good. I'm going to add the iSpindel back into the solution. We're going to update the program, and that's going to be our last calibration point entered. With the iSpindel stopped in the solution now, we're sitting at 28.32, and that's what we're going to enter in now for our very last calibration point. Just going to click add data there. And that is the last of our calibration points added to the table there and plotted to the graph on the right. And if you look at the bottom of the page, you can see there's 3 formulas there, and that's what all this hard work's been for. What we're going to use those for is to actually convert the tilt values into the gravity values, and that's what the apps that we use are going to reference to do that. So first things first, we're going to keep that safe. We're going to make a copy of that. And once you've saved that somewhere safe, we're going to go up to the top to the gravity unit and change it from specific gravity to Play-Doh. And we're going to take those formulas as well and save them somewhere safe too. And even if you don't measure in Play-Doh, there's certain apps that do have to use those formulas and then convert back to specific gravity. So it's really important we keep a copy of those too. And that's it for calibrating the iSpindel and getting that polynomial formula. And now that we've got that, we're ready to link the iSpindel with whatever services we want. I've got plenty of videos coming out on different apps that can connect with it, so make sure you subscribe and check them out.